Coming up on Regarding Men, so you say you want equality. Welcome to Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard and where red pill isolation comes to die a quick death. Indeed, and I'm joined today by my usual compatriots, Paul Elam from paulelam.com and Janice Fiamingo of the Fiamingo Files, two of my two favorite men's advocates. And today we're going to be talking about, so, you think you want equality? Yeah, that's what they think. And we're going to be talking about two very contrasting views of what this equality thing is all about, this gender equality thing. What is it about? And we're going to be contrasting what Regarding Men thinks about gender equality and what the UN feminists think about gender equality. And the two are very different kinds of opposing viewpoints. And we're going to start off talking about what happened recently with a gold mine, an explosion in a gold mine, which trapped a number of men in that mine. And we're going to go on after that and talk about something created by the UN Women about their view of gender equality. So let's start with the mining story, and let's see if we can find just where that guy is. There it is. China mine rescue, 11 miners brought to surface alive. Okay, that's good. That's good. But guess what? You read through this article, and what do you find? You find they never mention women, and they never mention men. They just talk about minors. What does that do when people avoid saying men and only talk about minors? What do you think, guys? What does that do?
Well, according to the headline, at least the mine, it appears that the mine was rescued. And but this is standard fare, and I can assure you that if one of those rescued had been a woman, that would have been in the headline, and it would have been repeated in the story throughout. And we see this over and over again throughout the years. They say 10 miners rescued, or 10 people killed, including one woman. 10 people rescued, including one woman.
Yes.
Somebody farted, including a woman.
No, not in that case.
Oh, me.
Probably not in that case, but it's standard journalistic procedure that when men are imperiled or killed or placed in danger, they become their professions. They are miners, they are construction workers, they are law enforcement, they are soldiers, they are any number of different professions, but they're not him, and they're not he, and they're not men, because that would humanize the people who are affected. And we can't have men humanized in a society that depends on men's sacrifice. So what we're seeing in journalism is a reflection of that. We have to keep men dehumanized in order to keep tolerating them being dead. And of course, we can't tolerate women being injured, killed, or anything like that. That's why you see when there's 25 men killed and one woman killed, they're going to say 25 oil workers were killed, or 26, including one woman, because that is really bad. It's bad when women die. And apparently, according to our media, men don't die, but miners do, and other professions do. But men, no, they apparently live forever.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, you couldn't get a clearer illustration of, I think, Warren Farrell's expression that men are human doings rather than human beings. And you couldn't have a clearer illustration of the fact that any time the context would seem to provoke some kind of empathy or concern for human vulnerability, the gender of the men is just screened out of the discussion. They become gender neutral people. The only time men's sex is emphasized is when they're doing something bad, when they're the perpetrators of evil. Then, of course, their sex is very, very much placed at the foreground. It's really remarkable. I mean, even when the studious need to de-emphasize the male humanity of these workers, even when that studious need leads to very awkward prose, as if we move to the next screen, we can see, and Tom, I know you highlighted for us, every single time the report uses minors, when you would have expected it would use men in some of those places. I mean, it's
at least a
so
couple
awkward and strange. Yeah, I mean, it's if you read it out loud, it's truly bizarre. And if these had been women in a similar kind of situation, of course, there is no way that their sex would have been de-emphasized and hidden. There's no way that their profession would have been emphasized over their female humanity. I mean, it's just crazy. TV footage showed the first miner who was blindfolded to protect. If they could have found a gender neutral pronoun instead of his eyes, they would have put it in there. If they could have left out the gender pronoun altogether, they would have done it for sure.
Yep.
Blinded to protect the eyes from the light or something like that. I wouldn't have been surprised to see that being lifted out as emergency workers cheered. The fate of 10 other miners remains unknown as rescue operations continue to try to locate them. The entrance tunnel to the Hushan gold mine in Shandong province collapsed after an explosion on the 10th of January. A total of 22 miners were trapped in the blast, the cause of which is unknown. At least one died, and it's still not known if the remaining workers are alive underground. The first miner was brought to surface. Never men. I mean, it is just, it's remarkable, the studious indifference to their male humanity.
Yes, and
you can bet if there were a woman in the mix there that had been trapped, there would be a see this other article on the special plight of women miners. They would have done a background story on that, and maybe two or three of them, and famous female miners throughout history, and women who have sacrificed. They would have done that.
They would. Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Famous female miners whose lives have been lost in their valiant work to bring us all a better standard of living or whatever it would happen to be. Absolutely. That would be foregrounded.
And the bottom line is they're marginalizing men. As much as feminism yaks and yaks about, marginalize this and marginalize this population is marginalized. Forget about looking at marginalization of men. That doesn't even exist. They don't give a crap about it. That's exactly what's going on here. Men are getting marginalized. Yeah,
it is extraordinary.
It really is.
Yeah. And I remember reading an article, and I'll include it in the link below so that anybody can look at it. It's an excellent article. It was written way back in 2015 by a guy named Glen Poole. And it's called, now I forget the exact title, it's something like 9 out of 10 deaths in police custody are male. Who cares? And he goes through the mechanisms of this dehumanization of men and the marginalization of men in any case where empathy might be evoked, or in any case where they might be shown as vulnerable, as suffering, as being killed, being made to feel pain, etc. The only time he says that their sex is foregrounded is when they're bad and when they're the perpetrators of some kind of harm, especially harm to women. Then, of course, their sex is foregrounded. And it's, this is a perfect illustration of it.
Yes. Same thing, only different.
Yeah.
So, should we move on to the
so let's move on.
Let's see what we've got.
Keeping that in mind.
But I want to warn everyone, put on your seatbelt, because this is definitely one that is difficult. And there it is. There's the UN Women, welcome to Equiterra, where gender equality is real.
Yeah. And the UN Women, I mean, I don't even know anything about this organization. I just know it's one of the bodies of the United Nations that is tasked with, well, it's given a whole bunch of money in order to put in place programs and policies all around the world, allegedly to bring about gender equality and to help girls and women. And its gynocentrism is unabashed and overt. It's assumption that in every sphere of human endeavor and human life, men are privileged, men are cosseted, men are powerful. Women, on the other hand, of course, are vulnerable and hurting and need to be aided. That is simply assumed. It's never argued for. And I mean, this thing that they have put together, this imaginary world that I guess the UN is supposed to work towards, all our money is supposed to go to fund this utopian dream of the UN Women Organization. It would be risible, it would be laughable and ludicrous if it were simply made by some women's organization somewhere. But considering the might of the UN, and that this is what our money is going towards, I find it a terrifying vision that disappears men and their needs and imagines just endless money to be used to advantage women, and has absolutely no grasp on gender reality whatsoever.
Yeah, I think there were like 23, 24 gendered agencies of the United Nations, all of them for women, different agencies that are working to create this utopia. And it's probably fitting. The UN has been pushing for imaginary worlds for a long time. And I think this just more or less just follows through with their long time mission. Mm-hmm. And I love the way they announce it. We found a country that has achieved gender equality. Oh, they made up a country that they're claiming as gender equality, but as we will see when we dig into this, they do not have gender equality, or that is not the aim at all. The aim is to privilege women.
It's only about women and girls. Yeah. Women and girls feel safe when walking at night.
Yeah.
Well, do the boys and men feel safe?
I know, that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah,
like, they get killed more often.
Feel safe for one thing. Like, who cares what? I mean, well, I guess we care in some way what people feel, but let's talk about reality. Yeah, I was just doing research on homicides in Canada, and men die at 3 times the number that women die in an average year. So let's not talk about whether women feel safe or not. Let's talk about the reality of working to make all people safe and acknowledge the fact that men are the ones who are most at risk on the streets of our cities.
Janice, you obviously don't understand equality. It has nothing to do with men.
Oh boy, it really doesn't.
It's just, it's incredible. Let's just read through it and look at a few of this is sort of their overall picture. And it's just remarkable, the things that are left out, such as the fact of gold mine disasters, the one instance that we just looked at. Totally ignored is the reality of the occupational fatality gap, the gender death gap, the empathy gap, the gap in skills attainment at universities. There's so many areas in which men are lagging far behind women, in which women are privileged, in which it's obvious that around the world people care more for women, and none of that reality is acknowledged here. So what they talk about, is women and girls feeling safe when walking at night. They get paid equally as men for work of equal value. And there is the word, of course, value. Who decides what is the work of equal value? Why does it have to happen?
A suggestion along those lines is that, for instance, a receptionist is of equal value to a neurosurgeon. And as long as we accept that premise and premises similar to that, then we can maintain the equality narrative and the equal valuing narrative throughout this conversation. You just have to understand that, babysitters are every bit as important as university professors and doctors and attorneys.
And should be paid accordingly.
Yes, they should. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it often seems to happen when they're talking about work of equal value, that the work that the women have chosen in this case, and I don't know if they'd go as far as you, Paul, in saying that, a receptionist is doing work of equal value to a surgeon, but they would say, well, but the receptionist is doing work of equal value to the janitor or something like that. Yeah. But it just so happens that the work that they claim that is of equal value, but in which the male worker is getting paid more than the female worker, it just so happens that that male worker works more difficult hours, works at a dirty, often dangerous job, is not sitting down all day in a comfortable, well-ventilated room in a comfortable chair, but is in fact, dealing with toilets and garbage and sewage and, all sorts of unpleasant things. And that there are reasons why women are choosing not to do that kind of work, and reasons why that very necessary work is paid more highly than the other work that is being chosen by women. And, the refusal to acknowledge that basic fact of human choice and the different gendered choices that men and women make just, makes this, an exercise in crazy making utopianism, in which endless money is thought to exist to reward the work that they decide should be rewarded more generously. Right. It's never made clear how all of their dreams and perfect solutions will be paid for, how the massive tax burden that would be required to make that possible is to be borne, while at the same time, they're imagining men and women working fewer hours and spending much more time home with their children and being paid by their employers to stay at home, and all of these different things. None of that is ever addressed in any kind of serious way. The idea is simply that if we will it, we can make it so.
And you've got to admit, in Equiterra, we do not need to factor away variables that compare income. I mean, come on, folks, it's really simple. Either she makes as much as him or not. And if you want to throw in things like that, he's like injured on the job all the time and he's under constant threat and danger. I mean, you're just cluttering this up with irrelevant information. If she's not making that money sitting behind the desk, answering the phone every 4.5 minutes, if she's not making the same as somebody that is, I don't know, say, lifting up cars and tearing down engines and things like that. Again, you're confusing the important issues here. Equiterra does not recognize different variables when it comes to employment. How else would it be equal?
There you go. Let's look at number one.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's see. There's number one. Now, what the UN Women did was they made this big mural, and we're going to be looking at different segments of that mural. And so you'll see one segment here that they called Unstereotype Avenue. Okay.
Yeah. And supposedly we still live in a world in which gender stereotypes operate to constrain what little girls can imagine they might become when they grow up into adults.
Of course.
Yeah. So, this is the whole idea. Oh, gee, if you ask a little girl walking along Unstereotype Avenue what she wants to be when she grows up, she could tell you, I can be anything: a scientist, an engineer, a Supreme Court judge, an Olympic champion, an artist, or astronaut. Not even the sky is the limit when it comes to dreaming big. The word stereotype has lost its meaning in this country. People root for the girl who wants to be a professional football player, not question her capabilities, and teachers encourage all of their students to choose STEM fields instead of assuming that girls wouldn't be interested in them. I mean, what do you say about this nonsense?
I say one thing. I didn't see the word boy anyplace.
No, no, because it's assumed, of course, that boys are encouraged to do everything when we know that in the vast majority of public schools today, the vast majority of teachers are gynocentric women who think it is part of their task as teachers to give special encouragement and special consideration to their female students and to ignore the boys or to see them as problems, and even to give girls higher grades.
Oh no.
There have been
Crazy, right?
studies done about the fact that that is part of what is going on in schools today, accounting for the greater dropout rate of boys.
Yeah.
So that the problem that we have today is the exact opposite, and of course is caused by this narrative of female disadvantage and the need to encourage and empower girls.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
And I love this added thing in here that they celebrate diversity in Equiterra. It's not feared, because as we all know, we all really fear diversity. Everybody's terrified of that. And I'm glad they've recognized that. I mean, this is honestly, unstereotype. Is that even a word? No.
It is
Yeah.
today.
I mean,
It's
it's
not.
so silly pretending that there is a problem that hasn't existed for at least the last 60 years. I went to school
Exactly.
starting in the 1970s. I was told from day one exactly this, that I could do anything I wanted to do if I had the skills, of course. I mean, I appreciated my teachers and my parents for making that an important caveat. If I was willing to do the work and put in the hours and defer gratification, as the phrase goes, and if I had the talent. I mean, I just love this. Teachers encourage all of their students to choose STEM fields. Well, why would you do that if your students don't have the capability, the intellectual chops, and the drive and the determination and the conscientiousness to excel in a STEM field? Why would you encourage them to go into something that they're not going to be able to make a contribution to? But of course, that assumes that there are actual differences between individuals, not necessarily between the sexes, but just between individuals in terms of ability and intellectual capacity. But that is not to be talked about either.
Well, besides, they've been encouraging women for 25, 30 years vigorously now to go into the STEM fields, and they don't want to.
Why not?
They don't do it.
Why don't they?
They make different choices
Exactly.
with
They
their
don't want
lives.
to.
And they do. I mean, to some degree, we're talking about a difference in aptitudes, but let's assume that everybody has the same aptitude. Women make different choices, many
Yeah.
of which revolve around lifestyle and comfort of living. And I think that speaks to women's intelligence.
Yes.
I
do what they
wish
wanna
I'd
do.
make different choices sometimes
what they
that
want.
really facilitated an easier life for me. But it's like what they're saying is, to women with this, is that what you want doesn't matter. Here's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
It's
ridiculous.
the
Yeah.
biggest
Crazy.
stereotyping you can possibly imagine.
Exactly.
And I'm sure they'll make really good money because the currency in Equiterra is unicorn glitter shits. That's what you
Exactly.
use to buy things with. And
Yeah.
they manufacture that by the bucketful.
Oh man, they
all
do.
the time.
They do, and they
Well,
get.
and the actual fact is that that women are going into specific STEM fields. In fact, Mark Perry has found that in the field of biology, for example, women are far outpacing men as
Right.
graduates from university with degrees in biology. So that's one of the STEM fields that women are very, very interested in. If you include medicine as a STEM field, which traditionally has been done. Well, there are more women graduating with degrees in medicine than men nowadays. So women are surging forward in that profession too, with serious consequences actually, because women don't tend to want to work the same hours as doctors. They're certainly not prepared to move to small towns and rural areas where doctors are desperately needed. They're not as prepared as men are. And that's partly because they know they have options that men don't tend to have. They can themselves marry a doctor who is going to earn a very good salary by working those extra hours, and then they can cut back and have a nice profession, but a much more livable work-life balance. I mean, women just have more choices. Yep. And so like none of this is true. It doesn't correspond to reality. The only areas in which men significantly outpace women seem to be now engineering and a few of the very hard natural sciences like chemistry and physics.
Yeah.
Where it's really numbers based, and that does seem to reflect the different interests as well as aptitudes of men and women. It certainly has nothing to do with whether women are being encouraged to do things or not, dependent on stereotypes. I mean, the thinking is so antiquated, and it covers over a bias against boys and men that's really very worrisome, and of course is just simply wrong.
Yes, I've never seen such strong blinders, where people simply cannot see anything outside of this little teeny field of vision. And that's what you see. Should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, if we can bear it.
I was going to say, what's the next one?
I'm getting mad.
Violence-free alley.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Violence-free alley.
So this is just more of this nonsense that women are the victims of violence more often than men. And the only way they can make that even remotely credible is to count as violence all sorts of things that are not violence, such as what they call sexual harassment, which of course can be anything from, a man commenting on how he likes a woman's new hairstyle at work, to asking her out for coffee a couple of times, perhaps too persistently when she isn't actually interested in going out for coffee with him, all the way to catcalling on the street, or what have you, all of which are certainly, some of them might be mildly unpleasant if you don't like being catcalled. A lot of women do enjoy it, but if you don't happen to like it, it's mildly unpleasant, but certainly doesn't compare to being beaten or killed as you're walking home from work, as happens to men.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense.
Crazy.
I mean, and it's even made clear here, they aren't taught to walk with their keys between their fingers in case they're attacked. Okay, well, that is serious if indeed women face that as a major issue in their lives. I think most women don't in most towns and cities across North America, but okay, yes, if some do, that's a terrible fear. But then notice how that's linked to or worry about being judged for the clothes they wear. Oh, how terrible. I've been judged. I wore a skirt that was short and somebody judged me. I mean, I don't know. It's just, like, as you said, Tom, the blinders, the determination to find everything in a woman's life, no matter how trivial or even pleasant, a source of grievance is just
amazing.
It's astounding. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Only women have problems. Men don't.
Yeah,
which makes me wonder when I'm looking at that image. I guess in Equiterra they don't have problems because everybody is happy and wonderful. So why do they need support services that are on that one building? What on earth could possibly wrong in Equiterra that somebody would need some additional help? Oh,
that's a good point. Well, they do say, I thought that was an interesting thing at the bottom. They say domestic violence is a rare occurrence. So there it is, Paul. It's rare, but it does happen occasionally still. And notice
laws against it.
As if there aren't now.
Unlike here, where it's legal to beat your wife.
And encouraged, of course, Paul.
Yes,
absolutely, and rewarded.
Yeah, and of course we have no services to support victims, i.e. female victims. Right. It's true that we don't have any services or very, very few to support male victims of domestic violence. And in fact, those victims are liable to be arrested and charged. if they call the police to report the violence against them. So yes, it's true. We don't have gender equality when it comes to domestic violence, but that is not on the minds of the foolish women who are creating these images in this text.
Yeah, I like there's no such thing as femicide. Women are
Yeah.
valued and respected. So I wondered to myself, well, is there such thing as homicide?
Well, and there is no such thing as femicide. I mean, what a bizarre thing! Like femicide is just a made-up term that to prioritize.
Much like Equiterra itself.
Yeah, it's just it's a made-up idea.
Yeah.
It's supposed to denote that women are being killed because they are women,
Right.
and that somehow makes their deaths more awful and more regrettable. Whereas when men are killed, that's not a special kind of gendered crime. That's just ordinary killing. They weren't killed because they were men. They were just killed, and so therefore their deaths are not as regrettable. And that's what feminists use in order to cover over the fact that many more men are killed every year than are women. I mean, wow. And the talk about
maybe we could change the name to equicide.
Yeah.
Whoever's killed, it's an equicide. Because in Equiterra, everything's equal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just like the real world.
And no one gets killed. Are we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Well, let's see what the next one is. Oh, Equal Pay Street.
Well,
Yeah.
there they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're knocking down workplace discrimination there in the back. And you can see the glass ceiling is there in a little big tub. Wow.
Oh, yes, it's been broken.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's broken. It's
shattered.
gone.
Yeah.
Equal work and equal pay. And of course, that myth was busted up. How many years ago now did Warren write that book? Jeez.
Late
A long
70s,
time
was
ago.
it? Yeah, I don't, yeah.
15 years maybe?
It was even destroyed in Forbes, for pity's sake. I mean, this has been one of those zombie ideas that doesn't even surrender to a headshot. It's been totally destroyed over and over and over again for years. But you can't tell that to anybody who wants to believe that women are getting shorted in their paychecks.
Yeah. Yeah, and they talk about systemic barriers. I don't even know, I was thinking, what is a systemic barrier? Like it's a nonsense phrase. It implies that there's something built into the system. But what would that be? I mean, it's illegal to pay a woman less than you pay a man for the same work. It's been illegal since, I don't know, in the 1960s. I think that law came in.
Right.
It's illegal to discriminate.
It never was a real practice to begin with.
Correct.
Employers never really discriminated much against women in terms of pay because they couldn't compete with each other if they did.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you could pay a woman less for the same work, then you would hire. Employers would be delighted and would hire all women. Yeah. I mean, I think there did used to be discrimination, but it was a different kind of discrimination. It was based on whether you were married or not. And so a married man often got a pay raise over a single man because it was understood that he was having to support a family. But I don't know, when that practice died out. I don't really know much about it. But this notion that employers paid women less just out of some kind of discriminatory attitude, and that there is still, it's the exact opposite again, in law firms across the country, in many other kinds of big corporations, the discrimination works in favor of women because these big companies want to be able to promote themselves as progressive and feminist, and to show off the way in which they have promoted women to the highest levels. And so if you're a woman who's interested in putting in the work, you're in a very good position. But again, we have to keep pretending that it isn't so and pouring more money into various kinds of programs that advantage women.
Yep. Crazy. Number 4?
Number 4.
I think this is my favorite.
Yeah, this is the best.
This is my favorite, toxic masculinity recycling plant. Holy mackerel, they're going to fix toxic masculinity. And here's
Yeah.
a tip off. Look at what they're dumping into the tub that goes into the recycling plant. And if you look closely, it says, girls are weak. Okay, here's a clue.
Okay.
Girls are weaker than boys by a long shot. A little boy at 12 years old, his upper body strength quadruples. Quadruples. Young boys who are 13, 14, 15 have a huge amount of upper body strength. They're much stronger than girls. And yes, girls are weak in comparison. Period. That's a fact. That's not a question. So they're
Of
pouring
course
it
it
in.
is.
Girls are weak. Oh, pour it in the toxic masculinity recycling bin. And then the next one
And I
is
find and one more comment on that, I find that particularly ironic, given the amount of infantilization that comes from feminism,
Yeah.
infantilizing women, making them weak, making them snowflakes, making them offended at every remark that is ever uttered around them, making them cry because they didn't run IBM by the time they were 22 and the patriarchy that stopped them.
oh
Yeah,
god.
if,
Whoa.
if they should have a feminist dumping that into the bin if they want to correct the problem.
Exactly.
Yes.
Remember the article we looked at for our last episode about the 24 people who had been found in Sweden? It's an old story, but
Right.
back in 2011, I think
Right.
24 people who were found in this pedophile ring and or child pornography ring, and the 23 women who were not put into prison as compared to the one man who was. And the reason they weren't put into prison was that they were not well balanced individuals. In other words, they were all weak and had been preyed on by this one man. I mean, so there it is. Yes, that's a feminist and of course a gynocentric assumption that takes away agency from women and
Yep.
means that we should treat them far more leniently when they do
Yep.
bad things.
Yep. So maybe that one should
Like,
be in
like we
there.
do with all strong people that we hold in high regard.
And the second bag they put in there is men don't cry. Men don't cry. I got news for you guys. Testosterone limits men's emotional tears. So men don't cry as much as women. Period. The end. Finish. And it's for
Not only
biological
that,
reasons.
there's something in the tear ducts themselves that are larger in men than
Yes,
they are in women.
that's right.
And it takes more tear production to make a tear spill out of a male eye than
Exactly.
it does a female eye.
Yes.
And the fact is, this is something that I've always has just been a big bone of contention with me with the psychological community. Just get over it. Men don't process emotions in the same way, on average, that women do. We don't. We handle things differently.
I'm with you.
And yes, men cry sometimes. And
Right.
I don't know any men that are embarrassed at having cried. I mean, this
Right.
whole myth about that we're terrified of showing a tear to the world is bullshit. It always has been bullshit. Men are taught to master their feelings, and that is a good thing. It's a productive thing. It's a
Yes.
maturing thing in
Yes.
human beings.
Yes.
And feminists are such morons, they want to throw that out. And they think that that's a path to equality,
Right.
to make
Yeah,
men
well,
like women.
That's what the
and women,
goal is.
let's do it. I say, women should be taught to control their emotions too.
No.
I'd like to see fewer displays of
Oh,
female
God.
emotionality. It would certainly make the
Sacrilege.
workplace a better place to be. I would like to see fewer women's marches in which women whip themselves up into hysterical frenzies over their, perceived grievances. And in general, yeah, I'd love to see women controlling their emotions more. So let's talk about toxic femininity then, if we're going to get into this kind of name calling and slurring of entire classes of people. And let's talk about relational aggression, and let's talk about manipulativeness, and let's talk about gossip and all the ways in which women tear at the fabric of communities and harm one another and themselves. because of their particular ways of being in the world. It's just, I mean,
We're going
it's
to
so
need a bigger
horrible.
trough by the time Janice is through.
I'm telling
there's
you.
not going to be near enough room for all the garbage. And she's absolutely right. If
Throw it
women
in.
were more in control of their emotional lives, we wouldn't have feminism. It
That's
wouldn't
That's
even
for
exist.
sure.
That's a good
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The third bag is men should be aggressive. They're going to put that into the toxic masculinity plant and recycle it. Men should be aggressive. Well, I got news for these people. They're safe. They have a nice, safe place to sleep at night because of aggressive men. Men who are not afraid to stand up and say, no, you're not doing that. The sociopaths stand down because these strong men have stood up. And without those strong men being aggressive, you'd be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. So,
But I wonder, will they need that in Equiterra? Because apparently nothing bad ever happens there because they
there
have
you go.
instructed men to not be aggressive.
There you go.
I don't know how that adds up, but apparently it does in the mind of these
God.
ideologues.
And the last
Yeah,
one. Go ahead,
I
Janice.
love the sentence where they express how this is all going to come about. It's in that second paragraph there, the second sentence. In the toxic masculinity recycling plant, through innovative dialogues and learning, toxic behaviors are transformed into attitudes that perpetuate gender equality. I think they meant perpetrate, but anyway, whatever that means. Innovative dialogue. Is that what we've been having over the last 60 years of feminism? Has that been innovative dialogue? Feminists screaming at men that they have to stop being so toxic and being told that the way they stand, the way they sit on subways, the way they explain things, that it's all wrong and it all has to be changed? Is that what's been so innovative over the last 60 years?
Really?
Yet still, it seems men haven't changed enough to suit feminists. So far, the innovative dialogue hasn't worked very well.
It has not.
And along those lines, I love this last part here that says, freed from oppressive gender roles, people of Equiterra are not held back by dominant forms of masculinity, and they are happier and mentally healthier than any other society. Have you ever talked to a feminist and gotten an assessment of their mental health as they're railing about the way some guy that they're not even next to sits on a bus? That's their big social era or their big social concern of the time. That sounds mentally healthy to you? An obsession with the way people are sitting?
Yeah.
No.
TIV.
They're fucking crazy.
TIV. And
TIV, exactly.
The first thing that's going in there is boys will be boys. So they want to get rid of the idea that boys will be boys. Now, wait a minute. Last I checked, boys are boys. So, of course, they will be boys. The hell's wrong
their
with that?
mantra is boys will be girls.
That's what they want, Paul. That's what the recycling's going to do. It's going to go in there, and instead of boys wanting to be boys, they're going to want to be little girls. Because look at the little boxes on the other side. As the boxes come out of the recycling plant, what do? You get respect and inclusive language, and no means no, amongst other things. It's like, oh man, you cannot make this stuff up, Paul. This would be a good, you can't make this shit up. It's like,
yes, it would.
You simply cannot make it up. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's all built around the total denial that there is biology.
Right.
And that it matters to how boys and girls develop into men and women. And of course, if we get more and more women graduating with degrees in biology and we get more and more feminists in control of the education system, well, maybe eventually biology will declare itself irrelevant and will simply, prove that there is no such thing as biology. I don't know. I mean, that seems to be one of the ends.
Oh, yeah. God. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Oh, me. Should we go to the next one?
Let's do the next one.
All right. Let's see what's on the next one. Inclusion Square. Oh, boy.
So there it is.
Inclusion Square.
Yeah. One of the things that you've probably noticed by now is that almost everybody in Equiterra is a minority, or they're gay, or they're a mixed racial couple.
or they're in a wheelchair.
Or they're in a wheelchair, or they're handicapped. Thank you. That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yes, there have to be some of that. And I got to point out right here, one thing I'm not buying. If you look at the couple on the left, it appears to be a dark-skinned female and a white-skinned male with dark hair.
Yeah.
There's a blonde little boy there. That kid is not his. It isn't. This should be Cuckold Avenue. Because I guess in Equiterra, men don't care if the child's actually theirs. They're just happy to help the woman with whoever she slept with.
Paul,
Yeah.
that's not inclusive language.
I know. Send me back to the toxic masculinity.
But again, the blinders are so tight that the only people they're seeing are minorities or gays or handicapped people. It's like, no, the world's filled with, quote, normal people, or just regular people. Let's say normal, just regular. It's like, but they have something wrong with that,
And all three of us are part of white heterosexual couples.
Yep.
We don't exist.
I know. And not only that,
in
we're the bad
Equiterra.
part.
But we can't move there, which is a big relief to me.
Yeah. Well, we're part of the problem. We've had our
Exactly.
place in the sun, and we need to step aside and let other people take charge of our societies, because we know they'll do a hell of a lot better job than we've done so far.
Oh, boy.
We need to step aside so things can be equal.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to
how you
accept
get
silence
equality.
and subordination. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Just a little
absolutely.
bit of collective vengeance, sometimes is helpful when in the
Collective
struggle for equality. Yeah. It's quite something. Yeah.
It is something.
This is it's a place where, as Paul suggests, paternity fraud, parental alienation, unjust divorce proceedings, false accusations, wrongful imprisonment, all those kinds of things that we talk about here that affect men in their regular lives. None of those things exist. They don't need to be dealt with. There's absolutely no acknowledgement of those issues having to do with gender equality. And so, until these people are willing to acknowledge things like the gendered occupational fatality gap and the empathy gap in our world and the various other kinds of gaps that exist, this is just a lie about what we need to do to make our societies better. And it's a really dangerous one that such a powerful organization as the UN, the most powerful intergovernmental body in the whole world, is putting this forward realistically, not for a laugh, not for a kindergarten learning. I mean, it's so childish in the way it sets its vision forward.
Yes.
And yet this is put forward in all seriousness as something that we have to accept as important and get on board with.
Yes.
I mean, I can't get over it. I find it just terrifying. This is what happened when crazy feminist women are put in charge of envisioning the future.
Yes.
It is like something for kindergartners.
Yes. It's crazy.
And speaking of that, I think the biggest tragedy here underlying all of this is the lack of critical thinking, the total absence of it. And I think this goes back, unfortunately, to father absence in many ways.
Yes.
We have two generations now that have been raised more or less without fathers, and even the people whose fathers were at home were still part of the more or less fatherless generation, where critical thinking is absolutely discouraged. That's how you come up with these fantastic, crazy ideas that could not ever materialize into anything real. And you will have millions of people nodding their heads up and down and say, oh yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. And they have no idea how retarded they look doing this.
Yes.
And it's a tragedy.
Yes.
It really is. Yeah. And the waste of money and the waste of energy and the sacrifice in human productivity and human competence and just well-functioning societies as a result of attempts to put these various plans into action. It's astounding. And it's because, as you say, nobody has said no to these
Right. Right.
ideologues.
Exactly.
And that
Exactly.
job of saying no, that is the masculine role.
That's
And
right.
men have either not been able to because they haven't been there, or they've been disempowered, or they've not been willing to because they've been told they mustn't say no.
And this is what you get. You get a
Yeah.
cartoon vision of what gender
Yeah.
equality should be.
Mm-hmm.
And here at Regarding Men, we have put together something that's a much darker view, a much less cartoonish view of gender equality, and looks at just one aspect of how things are different. And that is the aspect of workplace gender equality. And let's have a look at that
Mm-hmm.
just real quick. It's a little bit darker, but this is
Oh my, we've come back to reality, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Equiterra.
Yeah.
Garbage men, antenna repair, sewage, cement, steel, pilots, loggers, farmers, commercial fishing, truckers, firemen, construction workers, miners, and roofers. It's like all of these are usually 90+% male.
Yeah.
What's it going to be in Equiterra?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, all of these occupations, which by the way are dangerous, most of them are dangerous, and most
Mm-hmm.
of them cause more death, are mostly men.
Yeah.
And
And they are
that is an interesting proposition, because here you have all of these different professions. In Equiterra, half of the positions for those will have to be filled by women. That means we're going to have many, many women in body bags and coffins
So, you
as a
want
result of
equality?
doing those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you want
Having
equality?
physical. Yeah. Yeah. Are
Yes.
women, are they interested in the physical discomfort of these jobs, the danger of these jobs, the lifelong disabilities that develop as a result of these jobs, just the dirt of it in their lives every day? There aren't very many women. There are some, sure, but not very many at all, interested in, willing, or able to do this kind of work.
Yep.
And until that is a front and center part of discussions about so-called gender equality, it's just a lie, and it's a really dangerous and disgusting anti-male fantasy.
Yes.
And it should be called out
And,
every time.
and if there really was an Equiterra, I mean, if we get down to the reality of that, they could create a country that operated with all these bullshit ideals and ideological goals. Still, on the other side of that, underneath where nobody looks, you would see men working and dying to support that society and keep it afloat. It would never happen without that
Yes.
going for it.
Yes.
And of
Right.
course,
Yeah.
they would walk around talking about how great things are in Equiterra and how people make, the same money for the same work. And they would totally ignore the fact that the people that are in the death jobs and the death professions
Yeah.
are dominantly male, and it'll stay that way because women are not going to do those jobs. We can
No.
talk till we're blue in the face, we can have all the ideals in the world, but you are not going to see women in logging camps anytime soon.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the limited capacities of this idea of Equiterra is that if you have Equiterra, you've basically rid yourself of grief. You know, there's nothing called grief anymore. And I think that's a part of this feminist dream, is no more grief. But guess
Mm-hmm.
what? You know, grief is really what brings maturity. If you don't have grief, you're not a mature human being. But they're trying to get rid of the very stuff that makes you mature and brings you around to having compassion, having understanding of other people. You know, is that grief, and they're trying to get rid of it. Crazy.
Well, yeah, it's an inhuman vision.
Yes,
And I mean,
yes,
I've
exactly.
found that, I've even found that in the discussions that have gone on over the last year around COVID. It seems to me that a lot of it has to do with this unwillingness of our society. Like, it's like there's this outraged disbelief that people actually die before their time. It's like we've got to the point where we don't even want to accept that. We don't want to accept the fact of death. It's I don't know. I find it is a very we're living in a society now that doesn't want any challenges of any
Right.
sort,
Right.
any pain, any sorrow, anything, and that is quite inhuman.
Yes, and it goes back
but
to
certain, except of course unless it's men, the pain and suffering and death of men is perfectly acceptable to a lot of feminist leaders, and even unfortunately women who've been influenced by feminist attitudes. And there is something really deeply immoral in not acknowledging the work and the attendant pain and deaths of men that is necessary to the societies that we've developed over time. It's wow. Yeah. Indeed. Amazing.
And I think this goes back to what Paul said, and that is fatherlessness is really at the root of this, this fantasy, as the father wasn't there to set the limits. He wasn't there to say, no, no ice cream till you eat daggone broccoli. He wasn't there to say that. So they always got the ice cream no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And it's how we ended up with 2 generations of women that I swear, and it's really unfortunate. You can take horse shit and put it in a bag and wrap a pink ribbon around it and say it's for women's empowerment, and women in this culture will line the hell up around the block to pay for it, either with their money or with their man's money. And I mean, this is the kind of training women have had, and it makes for, I think, very dangerous mindsets in people.
I agree. Are we finished?
I think we are. Yep.
I think we're nearly as finished as Equiterra is.
Oh man, let's hope that's true.
Before it started.
Let's hope that's true. Bye-bye, Equiterra. What a silly thing that is. But it's sad too. It's just so sad. People could be that limited in their understanding of men and women. Well. Oh well. What do we say?
With that, I will say that men
are
good. We did it pretty well that time, I should say.
All righty.
We did it pretty well.
Yeah, that only took us 94 tries.
Yeah, let's see if we can turn it off now. You all take care. We'll see you.
Take care. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.